Hello, everyone, and welcome to Right in Front of My Face, the podcast about big things happening right in front of us. I am your host, Shannon Hull, and it is a pleasure for me to be introducing episode number 4. 4 is a lucky number for me. I think I adopted this lucky number, actually, because it's my husband's favorite number, so now I just feel like it's mine, too. That said, I would like to introduce Angel. Angel and I met about a year ago, and her story has stuck with me for a few different reasons. One, because it is unbelievable. As she calls it, it is a real life pretty woman story, and I'll let her explain why. Her story is one that I heard, and as my jaw was kind of dropped to the floor listening to it, I was really realizing that these are two people, her and I, that come from completely different worlds, completely different circumstances. And yet here we are in life sharing the same space. I felt like it was really important for me in this interview to let her tell her story her own way. And while for me, it was kind of difficult to keep up with sometimes because it's sometimes hard to believe what she's saying, I felt like it was really important to give her the time and space to tell her story in her own way. So with that said, I am so pleased to be introducing Angel and to let her tell her story about overcoming addiction, getting through prostitution, and coming out the other end well and with something to say. So without further ado, here is Angel.
One day I'll do a book. I'm going to call it
That's
The Real
awesome.
Pretty Woman.
Seriously. Mm-hmm. Do you like that comparison? I mean, it's do you get it all the time?
It's like, come on, how many hookers are out there really trying to get themselves through school and they're walking the streets? No, not on the streets. Maybe escort service, maybe in Hollywood.
So you say you were escort. What's the difference?
Well, one, you get paid more money if you're not, and it's safer because usually somebody knows where you're at. When I was working for myself, I usually somebody knew where I was at, or there was tracking through my website or phone or whatever. But, yeah, you make more money. You kind of get to choose instead of being on the street. You don't know who's pulling up and they kind of choose you.
Man, okay. So I want to get into all of this, but I want to introduce you first. Are you cool with using your name? Do you want to use a different
name or my? No,
well, of course. I just want to make double sure.
Yeah.
Like we won't use last names, but
I don't care.
All right. Well, we're going to welcome in studio today, Angel. And I have only peripherally met Angel once, but her story has stuck with me now for over a year.
Yeah, I think so.
I met Angel at her day job, which is a photographer, right?
Mm-hmm. She
takes gorgeous photos. We could call them female empowerment photos.
Yeah.
What do you call it?
Sexy
photos.
Yeah. Boudoir yeah.
And they really, really are. So I met Angel because she was a photographer on a photo shoot she did for my friend. I just came along as like moral support and hair and makeup.
Oh, you did do hair and makeup. Okay,
I did.
So I do remember.
I did.
I was like, I thought she did hair and makeup. Yeah.
Yeah. I'm an amateur.
Did you have the blower thing too for the hair? No, you didn't.
No, I don't think so.
That was the other girl. Okay.
I'm not that official. Yeah. I'm not that official.
I bought one of those. I haven't really used it, but somebody brought one of those.
Oh, like a Beyonce fan?
Yeah, it's like a blower. It's kind of like a
leaf blower?
Lighter, yeah, for the hair.
Oh, I like that. That'd be a good touch.
It is good.
So we met, it had to have been over a year ago. And I watched you take these gorgeous photos and make my friend feel so comfortable. But what I remembered also was your openness in telling us the story about your life, which I remember sitting on the floor listening to and being like, what the fuck is she telling me right now? I'm like, this is amazing. And that story includes a past with addiction, a past with prostitution, and complete self-reliance. But to me, my favorite part of this story is your story about recovery and the work that you have done helping others down this path. And that is what has stuck with me. And I followed you on social media for the last year. I've seen the work that you do at the VA, and I am so honored that you are willing to come and tell your...
She's going to make me cry.
But it's true, you know, sharing your life story, which is so far outside of the box that I live in. So welcome to Right in Front of My Face.
Thank you.
And so let's start at the beginning. I will let you introduce yourself. Kind of tell me about where you're from. Tell me a little bit about kind of your background before we get into your story.
Okay. Thanks for having me. And I'm going to have 16 years clean and sober on the 16th. So around my birthday, I get super emotional. So who knows, I might cry.
Please do.
Good thing.
I will too.
She's filming it. I'm like, nobody can see me cry ugly.
Yes, that is something we should add. We are being filmed right now.
Yes, my friend Crystal.
For me, I really feel like I have a great face for radio. So I'm very nervous about being filmed. So we're both nervous.
Yeah, we're like,
yeah. So 16 years sober. I mean,
yeah,
that's an incredible accomplishment.
Yeah. So I am from, I was born and raised basically in Burien, and my mom was alcoholic and my dad was normal. And, well, he was married to an alcoholic, so I don't know how normal that was, but they both partied a lot, and it was in the 70s. And so, yeah, I don't have lots of memories that are good as a child because of that, except for going with my dad camping and stuff. My mom was pretty, she was verbally and physically abusive, and I was the only girl, and she was adopted. And so she had 4 brothers, and so she didn't get adopted till she was 2. So I think whatever went on with her was kind of transferred to me. Like I'd want something and she'd get it for herself, that kind of stuff. And I was on restrictions till I was 18 forever. And so I just came from that kind of crazy home, which I thought was normal. I didn't
because you don't know when you're a kid that's
I'd go to other people's houses and I'd be like, this is different. And I just knew that I didn't want to be at my house, but, and I didn't want anybody over at my house because I just didn't know if my mom was going to be raging or what was happening. But what I did learn from my mom, like they used to have parties. That's when she would be in a good mood because she's very creative and artsy. And so she could plan a really good party. And we were Catholic. I went to Catholic school till I was in fifth grade.
Okay.
And my brother was in 8th. So once he was out, they quit sending me, which it's kind of weird because we didn't really have money. So I don't know. Might have been cheaper in the 70s, but
maybe.
might have been a little bit cheaper way back in the day. But that one thing I learned from her was how to be a chameleon and kind of, I'd always have to know how to act by what her mood. So I could read people really well, which helped later on in my life to survive.
Well, it's a good life skill. I'm not so sure it's an awesome way to grow up.
Yeah, right. Exactly. Yeah. So my mom got clean when I think I was around 13 because she turned really evil, and I really didn't like her. And so even before I picked up myself, I mean, I'll back up. I know I had been drinking. I was 13, so I had drank. And I would steal booze even when I was younger from my grandma. When they'd all be partying downstairs, I'd get her Tupperware, butter dishes or whatever she had. And then I'd pour it full of all the different alcohol and then put it in a 2-liter and take it to school.
Experimenting like
super young.
Young.
Yeah. Cause I drank. So you kind of copy your parents and smoke. I started smoking really young, and I'd steal their cigarettes when they were partying. And then I used to serve them, get beers for people because they'd give me change or whatever, because I had my great grandma's give me aprons and I had a little pocket. So I also learned that being cute equaled you get money. So there's a couple of things. Yeah. And my full name is Angela, and it's funny. I heard a story, and my dad's his memory is not great, but I was told. So my mom wanted to name me Angel somebody off a soap opera, but my dad said it sounded like a hooker, so he wanted Angela. And I was like, my fate was set out way before I was it
was prophecy.
Yeah. And I told him that years ago. He even forgot how my now husband and I met at our wedding. He's like, how'd you guys meet again? And I was like, oh God. And then his wife is like, she's already told you that story. But yeah, so I just got into like running away, trying to get out of my feelings really early. And my mom had like pink hearts and cross stops, which for people who don't know, that's
I don't know
speed.
what that is.
And they used to sell, I think, the pink hearts in the back of Cosmopolitan. For some reason in my mind, I feel like I remember seeing that.
The 70s were a different
Crazy.
time.
Yeah, I know. So good.
I keep telling my mom, I'm like, we can't do anything as parents now. You could at least have diet pills and speed.
I know, all the stuff. And it was totally legit.
Exactly.
Yeah, so I'd steal that stuff. And I just, I copied what was around, and then also not trying to feel, because it was really rough in my house. And my older brother, and I don't really know their stories now that I've made amends to them, and because I ran away when I was 13. So
you leave home at 13.
Yeah.
Where did you go?
I got my suitcase and my Cabbage Patch doll, and I walked down the street to my friends. So my parents knew where I was for a minute, and then I met a guy at school, sold a lot of acid, moved in with him, and then they didn't know where I was. And because I went to an alternative school, I was kicked out of high school in 9th grade. So I moved in with him, and for months, like they didn't know where I was. And later on, I found out that my mom gave me a packet of pictures later on. And one of them had like my full name, my address, everything on it. And I was like, what, were you trying to get me kidnapped? We're like, what is all this info on my picture? And she said that was for the Green River Task Force because they were looking for you. And I was like, oh, which I wasn't even hooking at that time. But for some reason, I guess downtown Seattle, First Avenue must have been a spot because somebody told my older brother that they saw me down there. And so they automatically thought that I was out there hooking at that young of age. And I wasn't.
Wow. So you move out at 13, move in with
boyfriend,
an acid dealer.
Yeah.
And then what happens?
Well, I get pregnant by him, and I didn't know I was pregnant. I actually went to get the pill that day, and they're like, take it after you start your period or something. I just remember I never started my period. Yeah. So I was like, I never got to take the pill and because I was already pregnant. And I called home for some reason. I've been gone for months. And I called, so I was like 14 now.
And so you're pregnant at 14. Are you using at that point too?
I smoked pot and drank, yeah. Okay. And then I called home, and my little brother answered and said, Mom and Dad are getting a divorce, and the Green River Task Force is looking for you, which that didn't really resonate. Like, I don't even know if I knew about him then or whatever.
And also you were 14 years old.
Yeah.
So how much really?
Yeah. So I was like, oh no, I got to go home because I tried to poison my mom one time because I disliked her so much. I took everything under the kitchen sink and put it in her soda because she used to make me get her pop. I was her maid, get her soda. So I brought it to her, and before she took a drink, I don't think it would probably make her sick, but she's like, oh, this glass isn't clean. And so she didn't drink it. But it's just like,
I feel like perhaps that's something we've all maybe dreamed about. Like,
right.
So few of us actually follow through on it.
Yeah. And I actually think she was sober at that time and just like even more crazy. Cause I don't know if she was working a 12-step program or not, or, but yeah. So I went home after I got that phone call, like, oh, I'm going to fix something. And I was actually engaged to this guy and 14. And when I came home, she was gone, and my dad's super cool. So I was like, woo, party. And I didn't know I was pregnant at the time. And he even had my godmother take me to the doctor for a checkup. Mm-hmm. And this one thing they didn't do is test me to see if I was pregnant, which is interesting.
That is interesting.
Isn't that crazy? And so, I just stayed home, and my dad let me drink, and then I got bigger. I wrote a letter to my dad and left it on the kitchen table when he went to basketball. And when he came home, he woke me up and he's like, I'll support you in whatever you wanted to do, which was awesome. And so I got pregnant again at 17, and I stayed home, partied crazy. And one time he told me, whatever you do, don't turn out like your mom. I was like, okay. I was like, so fuck that bitch. I'm not going to turn out like her as I'm drunk eating cereal in the kitchen.
So where are your babies?
So my first one I had at 15, she's in Burien.
So you kept your kids.
Yeah. My first one. My second one I put up for adoption because I knew I was going down a bad path and that there's no way I wanted to be on welfare. And I just wanted him to have a better life.
So you have your second baby at 17, give him up for adoption. Mm-hmm. What happens then?
Then
because you knew you were spiraling in your own apartment.
I was totally off. Yeah. And I get in an apartment and they co-signed for me because I was only 17. And then I took everybody in because they take care of everybody. And, you know, partied, had a kegger. One girl punched my manager in the face. And so that was pretty much it. The cops came, took the door off, boarded up my windows, and I was out. And so I was homeless.
With your daughter?
Well, just before that happened, she said, I'll take her till you get a place to live. And I was like, oh, awesome. I got a place right away because I moved in with a friend and I called her and I'm like, okay, I'm going to come pick up. And she's like, no, you're not. And then it was like a bunch of choice words. And then I really like started juicing and then running away from myself.
So how did you find drugs at that point? Like, how did you, when you say you started using, like, tell me about
when I
how
was
that happened.
At home, like before they moved me out of the apartment, you know, before they put me in an apartment, my friend stayed with us. My older brother was there and he sold cocaine and acid and weed. So I had good access to there. And then I just would meet like down the street. There was this older guy that was a Boeing airplane mechanic who did a lot of cocaine. And so I'd go down the street and party with him. Or I'd just meet older, I don't know, if just walking and creepy older guys would be like, oh, it's a 15-year-old. And they'd party. And I hitchhiked all over. So that was another thing. I hitchhiked everywhere.
You're describing this time in your life. And to me, like, again, like I come from a place of being sheltered and when I was 15, I still hadn't kissed a boy. I had never drank at that point. Wow. I did when I was 15, I did receive the Centurion Award from my middle school. That's my claim to, it's for being a good student, Angel.
No wonder I don't know what that is.
So that is like that. I'm listening to your story through my own filter of like, holy shit. I like when you talk about access, like I wouldn't have even known where to go. And like, here you are walking down this path where it's just in front of you all the time.
Yeah. Yeah. It was like a magnet, I guess. And I was out there searching for it. Yeah. So I, was homeless for a while. I'd stay at my friend's house. And then when her mom was like, okay, that's enough. Cause I quit going to school. I was going to an alternative school by this time. And, I was just all over the place and I moved to California.
All the meantime. Using.
Yeah. Oh yeah, totally. And I started escorting. So I became a prostitute, when I was still living with, my oldest daughter's dad. His cousin was like, hey, and we went to, Charlie's on Broadway to meet this guy that owned an escort service. I must have been 14. And I just remember in my mind, it probably didn't look like this at all. But when I went in there, I just saw him and like these two like 6-foot models sitting by him. And it looked very like, oh, and I truly thought at the time that like you escort them to dinner, like you do whatever. I had no idea. And so, you had to be 18, like show them ID and stuff. And so later I called them. I don't know how I worked around it, but they let me work. And so I went.
Shocker that they would let
I know.
Beautiful underage
I know.
woman make them money.
Right. Exactly.
It's shocking.
And so I was calling Bellevue and I remember the guy was, wanted to sleep with me or something. And I'm like, and he said, you really don't know. And I was like, nope. And so he told me, and then, and he was totally cool. He paid me and we watched a Batman movie, like the first one or something. We watched something and then that was it. So I was like, cool. And so I used that. I played dumb for a long time. And so,
it's because you're actually smart.
Yeah, right. And I was like, what are we doing? So I did that for a long time. And then I went to California, and it just so happened me and my friend drove down there, and this guy at the pawn shop, because we were pawning all this stuff in the back, and we were in California. The only stuff we had left was some skis. And so the guy and one of the customers kind of laughed and was like, I'll let you guys stay at my house if you clean it. And I was like, 2 of us, 1 of him, cool. And he actually had an apartment in Santa Monica right on the beach next to the pier. And I was like, fuck yeah. It turns out he was an alcoholic and a cokehead. So that was equally as cool.
So, I mean, what you're describing to me right now, like, this is rough.
Yeah, it was crazy.
Like, this is rough when you are pawning your stuff as a young kid.
17 at that time, yeah.
As a kid for drugs, like accepting places to stay from random guys at a pawn shop. Like, that is rough. Are you aware at this point that this is not a normal childhood? Or are you still like, I am just in pure survival mode?
I don't think I ever thought it was my normal.
Yeah.
Yeah. I didn't think I mean, for me then it was fun. Like, I was having a good time.
And like, where was your daughter when you moved to California?
She was staying, my mom took her, and that's,
okay.
So as soon as she said that, and the friend I went to California with, that's who I moved in with. And her husband was a crackhead, like really, really bad, and always threatening to kill himself. And so her and I took off in his car. So that's the stuff we were pawning on the way down there. And then I had turned some tricks, so I had some money.
How do you get to that? Is this just like somewhere you can make money? Mm-hmm. Where you're like, fine, I'll just do this.
Yeah, and I'm pretty sure and there's a couple things. Like, I never really felt loved, and I didn't know really any of this until I got into recovery. You know, like, looking back, I was somebody's fantasy, and they were paying money to be with me. And so that made me feel good. So, yeah. And so,
and also if you're high, that might make your decision making a little,
way better. Well, I remember, I don't know if you're old enough to remember ABC school, after school specials or whatever.
God, yes.
Okay, yeah.
I lived for them.
Yeah, right. So, yeah.
As a member of DARE, do you remember, you probably don't remember DARE, but it was
something about off drugs.
Yes, I can't even remember what the
drugs. So I don't even know.
Yes, I was an active member in my middle school chapter of DARE, and here we sit.
That's awesome.
No judgment.
That is so awesome. Yeah. So I a few times I remember like putting on, and I went by Ashley. I went by lots of names, but Ashley was the one that stuck with, and but I remember putting on makeup, and then I was Ashley. So it was I was somebody else when
you could disassociate it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So my addiction just got worse and worse. And
are you taking everything at this point?
Everything but heroin. I didn't find heroin yet. And so, I would do everything, and I drank a lot. And then came back from California at like 19 and stayed with my mom. And I was it was really hard because her girlfriend, which she still didn't, they slept in the same bedroom. She took me in, and she just was like, I'm just going to warn you, like, my daughter is calling her girlfriend mom. And I'm like, I'm cool. Like, she's been around, like, that's whatever. And she actually, I think, was one of my first sponsors, but I didn't really ever do any work in the program because they were both in a 12-step program.
Your mom and her air quote roommate,
mm-hmm.
you have like gotten to a place where they're clean and sober.
Yeah.
They have your daughter.
Mm-hmm.
You're okay with it. And they're watching you kind of go down this road, but still in your life.
Yeah. They were the only people, because I don't even know how I came back from California that time. Because I came back again, and I called her, but this time I don't remember. But when I stayed with them, I got a job because I worked at this professional nursing service, like a temp service. Mm-hmm. So they got me a job there. At first, I worked at like Precision Tune. Bosses partied. I'd gotten and then I started going to jail and stuff because I was like getting in fights. So I'd get arrested. I was going to bring you my mug shots to show you, and I forgot my picture because they're so good.
How many do you have?
I think there's 10, but there was another one that they said for some reason they didn't have the picture.
So you went
in King County. I have some out of the county.
So you've been in and out
of jail lots, but never for prostitution, which I've always been grateful that wasn't ever on my record. But it's been like assault, minor possession. I got tickets for that. Like I was always in the mix of getting in trouble. So, so that time when I came back, I had a couple normal jobs, didn't last long. I was going to a 12-step program, got a roommate.
Are you ever really clean at this point?
I am. And it would last a couple of months, I think, back then, not long, because I didn't get a sponsor and do the work, or, I was going, and I was young, like I wasn't done yet. I was just doing it for a place to stay, like stay at my mom's. And so then I was just off and running again. And I ended up in California again. When I was there, I met this, because of the guy who introduced me to heroin. That's how I ended up down there. I was 21.
Yeah, that's what I was going to ask.
Yeah,
like,
I think
at
20.
What point are we? Because
21,
you're going
22.
down this path that you're describing, which is pretty intense.
Yeah,
and still not using heroin.
Yeah, so I was probably 22. I think first time 21. I was just at a bar, saw this guy, grungy skater looking dude, like super hot to me. And I went up and I was like, "You want to suck face?" And he's like, "Yeah." So that was that. Started that lovely relationship.
Oh, good love stories.
Yeah. And so he happened to do heroin, and I found out that he actually came up from California because people were after him. And so he had friends that I was friends with actually. And they were up here. So yeah, it was just crazy. And then once he, we went downtown, he shot me up. Got home, I felt good, couldn't open my eyes on the bus all the way home, got home, laid on the bed, got sick, and I was like, this is heaven. Like, I have arrived. This is the best stuff ever. And one time he wasn't home, and I found a bag of Coke, and I was like, because he always used to shoot me up or hit me or however you want to call it. And then I found it, and I was like, called him at work, "You motherfucker." And he's like, "Wait, I didn't know it was there. Don't do it." And I didn't believe him. And so then I taught myself, then I just started doing it myself.
Oh, so did he shoot you up because he didn't want you?
Well, no, he just did because I didn't know how. And it's like, and then when then it was like, then I didn't need anybody. Learned. Yeah, and then I learned, ended up in California. We went to his parents' house in Moreno Valley, California to kick. And
what does kick mean?
Oh, I'm sorry. Detox, get well.
Got it.
Yeah, we were really sick driving down there, and just so many crazy stories in between.
So I just want to rewind because to me, like I've never seen heroin in real life. Like is there any part of you when you shoot up that is like, okay, this is the real deal? Like I'm now crossing a different type of line. Like did it feel that way to you at all?
No, because I had made a decision a long time ago. Like I was going to try every kind of drug, chemical, anything once in my life. Like I wanted to do everything, and I haven't done peyote. There's a lot of stuff that I wanted to do.
You left some stuff off the list.
Yeah, it's always my yets, but So
it didn't have that severity.
No,
to you, like it feels like to me, where I even hear the story and I get like goosies.
No, it was totally normal to me. It was just like the gradual
progression.
All
right, so how long did you use before you went to try to detox?
That time, I don't even know. Maybe a year. We were both really sick, and then we got to his house. It didn't last long, and he started stealing from his parents, and they had money. I was like, whoa. When I went there, I was like, huh. So you can come from a really good background and still be messed up.
Yeah, and I think honestly, this is a huge reason why I appreciate you coming on and sharing this story, because I do feel like, I look at my kids and I feel like there's so much more access to prescription drugs now, to all this other stuff that's a gateway that they can hide it so much better now. And I don't think that there's anybody that is immune to this. I think it's really easy to think, like, especially for me, like, oh, that would never happen because, I know where my kids are. And I you know.
Oh yeah.
And it doesn't, I guess my point is it doesn't have to be, you know, trying your first drink at 13 and running away. Like your story is.
Oh yeah. I knew lots of people.
Your story is extreme, but you must know.
Yeah. One time I went to this person's house. We were all messed up and we were going to his parents' house, and he lived in like a mansion. And my brain, I didn't understand addiction or anything at all. But I said this to my husband too, because he's super, super smart. He wasn't my husband at the time, but even him, people like that had material stuff or seemed smart. I was like, man, if I had a family like this or grew up in a house like this, there's no way I'd be fucking it up. And then with my husband, who was used to be a client when I was an escort.
Well, don't go there yet. I want to hear how it progresses.
Now he's the president.
But yes, that was a really good teaser.
I'm sorry.
He's a client and now the president.
Yeah. Hair club for men. So I ended up in California, and then I started hooking on the streets in Riverside, California. And it's interesting because we were talking about how I love true crime just before this. And last night I was watching one and I fell asleep. I'm going to rewatch it. In the 90s, I had to get on my calculator and do the math a bunch of times to figure out how many years ago. It was 25 years I was there, and it was in the 90s this killer was out.
Well, and now that you say that, it is like the Riverside.
It was, but over
Killer,
there he
wasn't it?
was somebody else. I don't know if he was called the Hillside Strangler. There was a guy out there killing prostitutes, and I was walking the streets. I was probably the only white girl in this neighborhood, and I ended up with living in a client's house. I was staying in a motel for a long time. I ended up, which I didn't realize till I had 15 years sober, that I was raped, and because it was oral sex. And in my mind, it's just like that motherfucker ripped me off and owes me money. And I actually saw him later in Riverside, and I knew he was a big tweaker. And so I followed him in the car. I was trying to give him a heart attack, and then I blocked him in, and I was like, motherfucker, you owe me money. And then, it's like that's how my brain worked. Yeah. And so I ended up in treatment because I moved in with this client, and he was a trucker. He was gone all the time, and I got to use his car. And I had certain clients. I'd go to the AMPM, stand at the telephone booth, act like I was on the phone, and I'd pick up tricks. And this guy was a regular, and I made like $100 a trick, which is really good money for the street. A lot of the girls didn't like me down there, but he was really cool. And when I went to treatment, I remember calling him because I needed cigarettes and stuff. And he's like, oh my God, like I didn't know your real name because I used Angel. It was my real name. And he's like, they found a girl and her name she was strangled out there. And I was like, oh my God. And so, and she was a prostitute. And, so when I saw that, I was just like, wow, there's a lot of times I should have been. I mean, I actually thought I was in the truck of the Green River Killer one time because I remember it was a truck, and I jumped out of a couple cars because I used to hitchhike. Yeah. And I get a creepy feeling, but
you're saying this like in such a blasé way. Yeah. I mean, it is like you've arrived at this place where you can talk about it.
Yeah. Yeah. My hope is always that so my background and my life and my story is my greatest asset, I think, to help other people.
For sure.
Yeah. And so I'm an open book. If anybody wants to ask me questions or I can be of help, it's and we all have some kind of something in our lives that we can help another person. So
for sure. So at what point do you kind of decide or hit a place where you want to get clean? Talk about meeting your husband. At what point do you meet? Do you meet your husband?
I worked for I moved in Seattle. I worked for a bunch of escort services, and I worked for this one lady. We kind of got into it, and she actually called me back and was like, I can't see you working for anybody else. Here's my webmaster, I think they called him at the time, guy. And so I called him and I started my own site. And so I met him. I had just gotten out of prison, and I was staying it was like an extended stay, a really cheap place, but it was near my probation officer because I had failed my UAs and I was supposed to go pick up trash, which I still never did. And
got to stay close.
I was staying on my, yeah. So, I had went to prison before that, I guess I should say, scoring $20 worth of heroin, to an undercover cop downtown. But so when I got out, I met him because I started working again, and he showed up at the door, and I was like, oh, and he was very interesting to me because I couldn't read him, and he's one of the only people that I couldn't read. And still to this day, even a sponsor said, he's just kind of one of those people you can't read. And so, and he was like the first guy I ever kissed. Like I never kissed a trick, and I can't remember if I kissed the first night or not, but I do remember we were talking and he opened up this bag of looked like diamonds and it was crystal meth. And I was like, ah, and I go, I got friends staying down in the other room. They'd love to buy some, And so it just started like that. And
so he's on meth.
Yep. He's on
You're
meth.
still on heroin.
And I'm on heroin and cocaine. Yeah. Okay. I would spend my money on that and crack. But, and then people like him, and other people, they'd have other stuff, and I'd do theirs for free.
Well,
that was the plan.
That was the plan.
I didn't hang out with other junkies because I didn't like to share. So there was that. So
he comes in.
Yeah. And then we dated on and off, dated, and then we became a couple. And he wanted me to quit. And I was like, with any guy that I dated, I'm like, this is a deal. This is what I do. You either live with it or you don't.
What is his story coming into it? So
before I kind of knew his story, he was actually homeless when I met him. Okay. I was like, I always love a homeless guy. And,
so sexy.
Yeah, it's true too. I just love, but yeah, so he, was originally from Michigan and moved to Seattle. He opened had a physical therapy business because he went to college and everything. He, sold his business and had some money, and then he got a loft downtown. I guess it was super awesome. I never saw it. And then basically he just smoked everything up because he smoked meth. And so he was staying at a friend's house, and then he was selling it. And then
how did he have money to?
He started selling meth.
So that's how he could afford you.
Yep. Okay. Yep. Oh, well, and wait, and then there was, I figured out later that he was so smart. He was hacking into people's stuff and stealing their identities and getting cards. And I can say he's cleaned up all that wreckage and paid all that back and made amends to those who would hear it and take it from him.
It is amazing to me, in all seriousness, the skills that you can acquire to get drugs. Like He's really is smart.
Like we would stay at the Westin. I stayed in all hotels all over downtown. And one time we were at the Westin and we stayed there for a bit, and he'd have these cell phones come in like that. You still opened it. It wasn't a flip phone, but I guess it technically was, but it was the newer ones. And I don't know if you remember, and it had the screen with the fish on it. And it was like,
oh my God, I totally remember that.
Yeah. Those were like the super cool. And then he had this big box come one time, and I was like, what? And it was really thin. I'm like, what the fuck is that? And he's like, it's an antenna so I can hit off that tower over there and blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, if I was as smart as you, I would not be getting high.
Yeah,
he was one of the ones, because I'm like, what a waste, So yeah, and then one time in a hotel, Red Lion downtown. It's not that anymore, but he was really tired and he went to sleep, and I had like $800 in my pocket, and he got the room under somebody else's name. And I remember I was getting loaded, and I had basically lived in my car. I traveled I had a car. And so I had a whole bell cart full of stuff, like all my hooker gear,
what is hooker gear?
I'd have lots of different toys, like vibrators and stuff like that. Cause my thing would be is like one and done, like you can get off and then that's it, or you're going to pay me more money. And so I try to do stuff where we didn't actually have to have intercourse. So I was tricking the tricks
again. Smart,
right? But yeah. So, and then lots of clothes. I had tons of clothes, tons of shoes, and just whatever else tweaky shit I had in there. But, yeah, so I was getting all ready to go and he was passed out and I looked out the window and there was one cop car down there and we were way up and I was like, holy fuck. And the phone had rang and it was the guy because he got flagged. It's when that stuff started happening.
Yeah.
And he called the room. And so I called down to the front desk and I was like, I don't charge that card. I'm going to come down and pay in cash. And they're like, all right. And of course I had to get high one more time. And then I heard a dunk, dunk, dunk on the door. And I was like, fuck, and hid everything. And he jumped up and like hid his stuff under the mattress, which they never found. And I opened the door and it's the manager with the police behind him. And I was like, I'm just a hooker. I'm just a hooker. And so he could hear me and he said, I don't like, she's a hooker. I don't know her. She's not any part of this. And
so he was getting busted for identity theft?
Yeah. And so his parents, when I found out where he came from, flew in, retained a really expensive lawyer. And of course, she said, first thing you got to do is go to treatment so you can beat this thing. And then he got out of treatment and then he begged his dad to like pay for my treatment. And so he was sober a couple of months and I was still doing my thing and he had got a sponsor, started doing the deal.
So that is like an act of true love in and of itself.
Yeah.
Do you realize it at that point? Do you see it as that?
No, I was fucking pissed. Okay. So when he finally got me, I finally went to his house and he got me in my car. And we had to take my friend home because I always had a road dog with me. And he tricked me to say, he was like, kept wanting me to come over that day. And I was working and he said, I have your photos and he was living in an Oxford house, clean and sober housing. Okay. And he's like, they're going to throw him away if you don't get over here. And, cause he knows how I love my photos. And then I was like, fuck it. I ended up showing up there about midnight. So we get in the car and we're on the freeway and he goes, I have to tell you two things. One, I love you. And two, I lied to you. He's like, I'm not going to the lawyers. I'm taking you to the hospital, detox, and then Lakeside Milam. And I was like, fuck you. I was so pissed. And so I went through every kind of emotion. Rage was the first one. I think I was punching him and I tried to jump out of the car at one point on the freeway, and then he grabbed my cell phone, which I still have nightmares about this. Like we break up and I have nothing and my phone doesn't work or I can't find a phone because it's the only way I can receive calls to escort, like to work. It's so crazy. And so he took my phone and threw it out on the freeway. And then I was like, raw. And
that's your literal lifeline.
Yeah. And so he stuck his hand out like he was going to choke me, but he never touched me. He's like, lean into it because I was just going up. Then I was crying and I still had dope, And
you're like, terrified too, probably.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I think I knew I wasn't going to be able to get loaded. So he took me in the hospital parking lot. I got loaded one more time. And
so how old are you
at the
point you detox?
So I got sober at 32.
So you have been using...
I didn't get sober right away when I went to treatment, though.
So you have been using those from the time you're 13 to 32.
Yeah.
So this is a rough process. I mean, your body doesn't even know.
It was.
I'm assuming like your body doesn't even know how to function. Your brain doesn't. Your brain's rewired.
Yeah. When you sober up, especially from heroin, other stuff is like you'll sleep or whatever. Alcohol, obviously, if you're, you can die from that one, from the DTs, and you can't, they don't ever say this, but you can from heroin too, because you can be dehydrated and stuff. They actually took me to the hospital twice when I was in treatment because I couldn't keep anything down and they were afraid of dehydration. And, so I didn't stay sober after that.
No, I mean, and your brain though gets rewired to receiving that heroin. I mean, it's hard. It's so hard. I only know what I've read.
If I would have had a gun when I was dope sick, I would not be here because I would have shot myself. It's that painful. It's so your my arms felt hollow. Your legs can't stop moving. You just want to puke. And then everything looks like you have a filter on your eyes. Like it just doesn't look real. And it was kind of like outer body, but in vision wise, but totally in my body. I was so sick. It was the worst. I mean, when I finally quit, because I used after that, I still escorted after I got out of treatment, and
at 32.
Yeah. So when I went to treatment there, I got out and lived in an Oxford. They told me, one Oxford said I couldn't work, being escorted wasn't legal. And I was like, well, I'm not moving in here then. And so, but I ended up going to Sturgis because my friend that, I used to work for, she had some girls going out, and I was like, get me on that gig. I've always wanted to go. And
that's a biker festival, right? The big Sturgis.
I loved Harley. I mean, I love him now, just not me on him. And so I went, with her, and the guys didn't know we were hookers because it was one guy, well, the one girl, he always hired this girl, but he wanted more girls so he could be cool in front of his friends. And so I ended up getting in a motorcycle accident there on the back of this guy's bike. And
you are not together with at this point.
I think we were on off. So I don't think we were together.
Taking a break.
Yeah. But I got really fucked up, and I was 4 months sober at that time, I think. And then I had to take pain pills, and that just opened it up because I didn't have a solution at the time. Like I wasn't doing the work. I had got a sponsor in one program because I heard it was harder, and so just whatever. I wasn't ready, clearly.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, I started using again. It only took a couple of months. I was totally suicidal, so I was going to kill myself this time, and had been at my apartment. He was over because he was sober, and he was always,
And this is after your accident.
Yes. And so he, would bring me food or whatever. Mm-hmm. We'd hang out. And I told him I'd be right back. And I left, and I went to get a bunch of heroin and cocaine. And I bought it from this girl who was homeless that had a dog. I told her, I was like, I'm going to go kill myself now. And I go, don't you want to kill yourself? Like, you're living under a bridge. And she goes, if I didn't have my dog, I'm like, why do you want to live? She goes, if I didn't have this dog, I would. And I wrote a suicide note. And then I snuck upstairs, and I had to do one speedball for the road. And somehow, I don't remember doing this. I guess I was on the phone with Chris and also puking, which I don't ever puke. Like, I've done heroin so long, like that's, just don't puke. But I was puking. And then when he showed up, he said my eyes were shaking, but I guess I called him. And then I knew he was trying to, I didn't know really that I called him or anything, that he was there. And so I was in my window, like I was going to jump. It wouldn't have hurt me, but I probably would have been able to run. And then the police were behind him, and he was saying, yeah, she's on heroin or something. I'm like, you're trying to get me to go back to prison, like freaking out. And they're like, we're not going to take you to jail, whatever. So they took me to Harborview. The ambulance came, and my mom showed up. That was the first time she showed up, because she just later told me that she was waiting for the phone call that I was dead. She was just waiting to ID my body. And because the last time she said she saw me, I was just gray and I looked dead. And so I went to Harborview in my Hello Kitty slippers, and I remember them pushing me in, and my mom were at the end of the thing, and I was just flipping them off. And I got to Harborview, and I was like, I didn't try to kill myself. I just did too much. And so I talked my way out of that, because that place looked worse than King County Jail. And I just stayed. And so when I left there, it was hours later, and I couldn't wait to go out and dig in my garbage to find the dope or whatever. And was sitting in the lobby, and I was like, fuck. And he had my car keys and my house keys, and he wouldn't give it to me. And I was like, stormed out. It was raining, and my slippers. And
so, he has stuck with you.
He has. Yeah. And he followed me, made me get in the car, got a hotel room. It was the first time my mom opened her doors to me, and I kicked on her couch. She tried to get me to treatment. I didn't go back to treatment. I kicked on her couch, and I got into Oxford House. I used to pray with this lady outside this meeting, and he said, this is going to be your sponsor. And I'd call her on the phone and she had me do like a mini inventory, which, the steps, the fourth step is like, why you're mad. And so she did that over the phone and I didn't know what she was doing. She's like, name 3 people or whatever. And then I'd hear her vacuuming. She was a house cleaner. And I'm like, what is she doing? And then she'd get back on the phone. Why are you mad? And then she'd go vacuum and she'd get back on the phone. What did it affect? And then she's like, and what's your part? It's like the end. And I'm like, what the? So what I got out of it was like I'd always been a victim, like, childhood, all that stuff. I always blamed my mom for my addiction. That was a start that I was willing to do the work. Like, oh, okay. I see how like
something at that point clicked for you.
Mm-hmm.
So you'd had to turn around. I mean, how do you, through the process of getting sober, relearn how to be a functional person? I mean, that is like
I'm still working on that.
80. Like that is a 180 going from living in hotel rooms to even just having an apartment. Right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Which I didn't have my own apartment for a long time in sobriety because I stayed in Oxford for a couple of years because I was doing the work and I went to a lot of 12-step meetings. And I mean, I'll have 16 years this month and it's still now I'm doing adult children of alcoholics and dysfunctional families. I can name that one because there's no anonymous on the back of that name. And that's another eye opener. Like, in one of the programs they talk about it's the layer of the onion. Like, and I used to hate that saying, but it's like I've done a lot of the 12 steps a few times and had different sponsors that I've worked with. And it's like each time it was a layer. And I have PTSD, obviously, from lots of stuff. And like I said, 15 years, I didn't realize that it was actually rape, that I didn't get ripped off. Like my brain's letting me see, right? Or my higher powers, like, you can handle this now. Because at some point I wouldn't have been able to. And like at 4 years, I fought to get my daughter back. And I was in an Oxford house and kids aren't allowed there. And I fought and won and got her back. And I used to tell people, like, be careful what you pray for. Because then I was like, fuck, I got this kid and I'm still crazy and holy shit. But thank God I lived in that house because I had a village to help raise her, and she got to see what happened when.
And how old was she when you got her back?
10. Addiction's crazy. In some of our literature, it says it's cunning, baffling, and powerful. And there's this lady that always says it's sneaky, patient, and fatal. And that's the truth. Like, people and like the people anybody who's addicted, it's like, they want families to know that don't know anything about addiction or don't understand, like you're never going to understand. So don't try. But they're powerless. Like if my mom used to, and this is something I'm grateful for that she did, is that she used to tell my daughter that that I was sick and that if I wasn't sick, I'd be there because she was too young to understand, but she'd just tell her that. There's a fine line between like enabling somebody you love and actually helping them. And I've had lots of friends who's relapsed. I've known tons of people who have died from this disease. So all my friends that I've gone out, I've always prayed that like really hard to come back. And some of them have, I pray for them to go to prison. And I had a friend that did because she was out there and she was telling me how much fun it was. And I was like, the only thing I could do, is like, I'll meet you at a meeting. Was never going to pick her up and put her in my car. And I don't give people money, even people on the streets. Like I'll carry socks or food in my car and then hand them that. And lately they've been really ungrateful. So, I volunteer now. I'm really big in the service. One of my first sponsors was like, go to this hall and clean the ashtrays, do this, talk to another suffering person in the room. And I'd be like, I have nothing to say. I'm like 30 days or whatever. And she said, she goes, yeah, you will. Like you just, all you have is your story. If you have one day more sober than the other person, you have one more day to tell them how to get, through. And so I just had really good sponsorship. And I had broke down enough that I was willing to listen, and especially to another woman, because I was like, that was a big thing for me.
So you're going through this, and I keep coming. Because I want to close out the story of you and Chris. You're going through, just to recap, you've tried to kill yourself. He has found you, helped get you to a sober house. You're doing the work now, got your daughter back. And then what happened? So what happens?
So I was in a relationship for about 5 years. He had dated people on and off for a couple of months, and because we had stayed friends. And then 8 years ago, so the guy that I was dating, he relapsed a couple times, and it'd be for a short period. And it was like I was growing spiritually, and he was not.
And you stayed sober despite his relapses.
Yeah, and it was like 5 years. Yeah, it was hard because I was like, he was my best friend, you know, and then I also went through, if he loved me enough, he would stop. Which then I started Al-Anon, you know, and that's for people if they have family or friends that are suffering from addiction or alcoholism. That's a meeting place for them to go get well, because it wasn't even about him, it's about me, and that's what I found out in Al-Anon. He relapsed one time and robbed a bank and went to prison, and so
it's a big relapse.
And then I was like, now we have to get married, and so then we were engaged. Because
keeping in line with excellent decisions.
Right? I'm going to fix you, and then so we ended up breaking up, and had, you know, his longest girlfriend he had was like 9 months, and we ended up getting back together. Like, we were hanging out, and he'd be really kind and like leave, like, for like old times, leave me money, $200 or whatever, or take me grocery shopping. Because I had a real job. When I got sober, I ended up working for the Salvation Army for about 7.5 years. And so when I had broken up with that guy who went to prison, we were in a house, and I desperately was looking for a place, and I was a felon, so nobody was renting to me.
That presents a challenge.
And so I got lucky, and this lady said to drive around and look for a thing that just says for rent, not a property manager. And the apartment I ended up staying in was, my manager lived right next door. And at first I was like, oh shit. But I'm like, oh, I don't party anymore. I don't have to worry about it.
Don't have to worry about it.
Yeah. And she was in the program, you know, she was also clean and sober. And so I lived paycheck to paycheck, and and I was great. Like, I was the happiest I had been in a long time. I was by myself.
I mean, you're feeling good in sobriety. You're feeling confident at this point.
Yeah. And I was driving a piece of shit truck where it was like crooked, you know, nothing power. But I was always grateful. Like, I have this truck. Like, each time I'd be like, nope, I'm grateful. I get to drive, blah, blah, blah. And that's when really got back into my life. And then we just ended up getting back together. So when we were in Paris, he proposed, and that was in 2015.
You two have known each other a long time at this
2001,
point.
Yeah. So, it was amazing. And I never thought that he would. And so it was a big surprise when he did. His family didn't even know. So it was awesome. And then we just got married June 5th. So almost 5 months ago. Yeah.
You're still a newlywed.
We are.
Your photos were amazing.
Thank you.
It looked like such an incredible day.
It was amazing. Yeah, we got married in Lanai, Hawaii. And he's in real estate. So he went from being a physical therapist and changed when he got sober and got into the mortgage business. And then, you know, his past, he was really open and stuff about it, and people that he worked with, and he stuff just worked out for him, you know, like when you're honest and do the right thing. And so he went from mortgage, and now he's self-employed and owns his own business, and he's in a lending thing, and he makes great money. And so I worked in Seattle for Salvation Army about 3.5 years, and he kept asking when I was going to resign. And so I finally did, because I would go down the streets and nobody wanted to be, you know, I worked in a really good shelter where you didn't have to leave. It was a men's shelter, and that you could shower, you know, when you wanted. If you had a job, you'd get a sack lunch. And I was a programs manager, which is crazy because I got my GED in prison, and not educated, but educated in life. So I was could call bullshit on a lot of people. And my boss was an ex-cop, so we loved each other. He actually married us. He came into Hawaii to marry us. Yeah,
that's awesome.
Yeah, it's amazing. And so I quit my job, and then got a little pig. And then ended up getting another little pig. So I have 2 pet pigs.
They're not little.
Yeah.
They're not little.
they're like 150 pounds and 130, but they're awesome. And then I always kind of been in photography because I was a hooker and had a website, and I would always do photos. And it's funny to think about it now because I would.
That's amazing. You were doing your own stuff.
I wasn't
doing
my own photos. I had a webmaster guy, but I was really creative. I would tell him what to. So like I'd be a school teacher spanking my own butt, and it's wrote on the chalkboard. So he'd Photoshop chalkboard like I will not chew gum in class, and it was funny because a lady who gave me his number that I used to work for, she's like, "Who's that in the photo with you? Who's doing your?" And I was like, "That's me." And she's like, and then
that's wild.
Yeah, and then I did one for the troops, right? Did the flag, camouflage. Like I was so, here's for you guys. Just crazy. I'd have happy hour specials. I don't know. I'd probably be really good at marketing if I.
It sounds like it. I'm like, maybe give me some advice,
right? But so now all these years later, now I'm doing photography and I just love it. And at 2 years sober, my friends and I, because I learned how to save money from one of my bosses and saved enough money to go on this trip with the girls that I kind of grew up with at that time, 2 years sober, and went to Florida. And I was like, we're going to do photos. And we're all very different. You know, one's like a teacher at the UW now, and we're just all very different. I was like the whatever you want to call it, the grungy one, the more punk rock one. I don't know.
Yeah, edgier.
Edgier. There you go, edgier one. And so it was a lot of fun. Like the first night we went to the beach, they're all, oh no, and second night they were naked. And then have their own photos out.
You have a way of just really making people feel comfortable. It is really a gift. I watched it. I mean, it was awesome.
Thank you.
The story of recovery and then continuing work and your willingness to talk about your past, I think is really special. And when we sat down, you were calling yourself kind of the real pretty woman. Mm-hmm. And I was asking if that comparison bothered you, because I think anybody listening is going to be like, oh my God, like this is like a real life. Does that bother you, or is that?
No, that's what I want to name my book if I ever get to do it. No, I think it's because when I watched Pretty Woman, I was like, oh God, she's flossing her teeth in the bathroom. Like, no, I'm shooting up in my neck, actually. That's what I was doing. But yeah,
it's glamorized for television.
It is funny though, because Richard Gere in the movie, like I'm like, this is my Richard Gere. He was in real estate. And I'm not going to college. But like whatever she was doing. But yeah, so it's funny. That's why I call it real, because I mean, a prostitute on the street would not. I've never met a prostitute that was walking the streets saving money for college. Maybe an escort. I mean, there's been escorts or dancers, maybe, because you make a lot more money, and that's why you'd go to that work to make,
Yeah. So, I mean, you are just a woman that is a survivor, like in the truest sense of the word, and nobody else did the work. Like, it's like anything else. Like, if you have cancer, nobody could go through chemo but you. Like, nobody but you could do the rehab and do the work and work the steps. And I just find that accomplishment amazing.
Thank you.
And I feel like your personality and your willingness to talk about it and share with other people really has the potential to reach the right ears and all of us. So I'm interested too in your advice to parents now, knowing what you know, right? And I asked this question a lot, because when you look at these kids and you're like, I want to protect you from this life, but it's so, the opioid epidemic is crazy. And I think it's hitting, affluent families. It does not discriminate. It takes no prisoners. And it's super scary to me. And as a parent, you're a mom, like, what's your advice to parents on how to protect your kids from this?
Well, can't really suffocate your kids, but I would say to know who their friends are and know, like, to know who their friends' parents are, because that's kind of, if you have pills in the cabinet, That's, I think for nowadays, it's like, that's where it starts, or liquor, and kids are always going to experiment. But like knowing the parents,
That's super interesting. I don't think
I would
that
think to know the parents. The kids are going to be kids, but it's kind of like, what do they have in their cabinets, or what's their thought? But I just have conversations with your kid. I mean, you could do all of the right stuff, everything. There could be a book written about what to do, and then there's still going to be kids that, can skip a generation, and if they just try it one time, they're hooked. Like, they could be getting bullied at school or not be comfortable in their skin, and they take that drink, and then they're like, they found that ease and comfort. And so it's just, and I think, if that happens and they're young enough and you still have control, like, you can put them in treatments and hopefully that sticks. Because I do know once you find sobriety and some recovery, it's going to be, it's a lot different to go out and use. Once you have had that, it kind of ruins it to go party anymore. And so the chances, I think, of people coming back from a relapse are bigger. If they've had that, and especially young, right? Because we learn a lot better when we're younger. I think it's easier to train our brain, but also if they're out there running and gunning, not to give them money, and the things I would offer my kid. I mean, my daughter was 17 and she stole $10 after we've had contracts and all kinds of stuff, and like, don't drink in my house. And she was more of a pothead still. And it's like, you can't have that in my house. And and she would break other rules. But when she stole the money out of my wallet, I was like, I can give you some numbers and addresses to the teen shelters, but you're not staying here, right? And so some people do tough love, some people don't. But it worked for me. Like, I just think that not giving your kid money, but giving them like the help, whatever that looks like for them. And usually people don't want it. So it's hard, but I wouldn't want to give my kid money and have it be that $100 bill or whatever it is that they go OD on.
Yeah. I think you said something about that yesterday that was really powerful, and something I'd never thought about before. Was not giving anybody money, because that could be the last time. Yeah,
could be the one
that they use.
Their last whatever. Yeah, and also I'm spiritual. I don't have a organized religion. I mean, I grew up Catholic, but which I'm grateful for. But whatever, if people believe in the higher power, whatever that looks like, that for them, that if they do interfere in their whoever they love that's choosing. If they interfere in that in any way and enabling, it's like that you might be interfering in the higher powers, whatever they have planned for them to come to their bottom. Like, so if people do have some kind of faith or they believe, like, trying to believe in that. Like, my mom used to tell me, like, you were protected. She called them guardian angels. She's like, you were protected.
I just think it's interesting too that you still have a relationship with your mom despite.
I'd be like, that's what I'm working on today. I've tried to have a relationship with her, and that's the adult children of alcoholic. Like, I've forgiven her. I tried to make amends, and she didn't want an amends, that's okay. She believes like in the laws of attraction, like if it's in the past, whatever. And so I was like, great, check. Get that one off my list. But she doesn't work a program now, and I know she's worked the 12 steps in the past, and I've never received an amends, and now I know the reason. She had dinner with my little brother, and my little brother mentioned like how she used to spank us, beat us, whatever, and that he's so angry, and she brought that up at a lunch because I try to meet her at least once a month and show up, and she said, I can't believe he's like making this up or why he thinks that. And then it was the first time ever I got to say, you did beat the shit out of us. You used to lock us out of the house. Like, I'd have to climb through the window to get food, like just whatever. And she looked kind of shocked. And so basically she's in a blackout, doesn't remember any of the abuse. And so that's today. That's what I'm dealing with. That's really hard. And I was talking to my sponsor about this yesterday. I'd love to hear her story as what it was like, being an orphan, adopted at 2, and like what she went through growing up to try to get some compassion for her. But I've always asked myself, because I live by the rule, I'd rather do something and regret doing it than not do something and regret it, right? Because then you can't. And so I think, like, if my mom died, how would I feel, like, in the relationship? And she's a stranger, and it's like my oldest daughter, it's the same. She decided to stop talking to me like 2 years ago. She finally, I think, got mad, and I made amends to her, and stuff changed when she lost like the love of her life. He died. We were all at the hospital, and it was really young. And so it's like, I just, at a point in my life, I'm watching like, me and my youngest are close, and she's awesome. And, but my oldest she's angry, and I was like, great. And I told her, like, I don't get along with my mom, and gave her a little history. And because I don't know if she knows, I tried to get her back, or, tried to see her more or whatever. But I just told her, like, go to therapy. Like, your resentment's going to kill you, not me. And so now, like, looking at it, it's like, I don't want my daughter to feel like I do right now, like being mad and not talking to me.
Right.
And it doesn't mean we have to have a relationship. I just don't want the anger there. Cause that's what it's like. That's the thing. That's what kills me when I think about it. It's like, oh, we just pass this shit along. But, and I would like to make, I guess, peace or have some closure with my mom and just tell her how I feel. That's probably the biggest thing. Just so for once in my life, I could be heard and seen. Cause I was never heard and seen. Ever. Yeah. And I'm pretty sure my daughter.
Oh, you were pretty loud.
Yeah.
You're pretty loud.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. She was pretty deaf.
It's really interesting. I do, their episode 2, my guest and I talk about the habit of rebellion that happens when you do not feel seen and you do not feel heard. And I think I revert to that place. That place looks different for a lot of us, but exactly what you described, that not being seen and not being heard can, in a lot of us, mean that we get really, really loud.
Yeah. And it's crazy. And I just have to say too, like, I forgive my mom, like, cause now I understand, right? She was an alcoholic and she did the best with what she got. And so the way I was raised is like, that's just what she knew. And so, and like, I totally get that, because I was an addict, alcoholic, and I did the best that I knew, because what I was taught, and it just gets passed down. So I just want to be clear on that like, I get that part. Like, we just passed that down. Yeah. I just want some closure. I mean, I've had lunch and stuff with her, and it's like, she's kind of negative. It's not so, I mean, we're a little different. She's not in a program. I stay in the solution. I help other people. I volunteer a lot. I get out of myself.
Well, yeah. I mean, it's that work is constant. I mean, I feel like we could sit here and talk
for hours. Days. I know, this is like way easier than I thought.
But I mean, I just think that a lot of us are raised with quote unquote, more normal childhoods than not. And this is so far out of the box from anything that I know, but like, literally we live within a mile of each other.
I know.
Like, we are in the same community. And so I do think that what you're speaking about and people's backgrounds, and even, I just don't think it's as far away as we think that it is. So I so appreciate you coming on and educating and being honest with your story. I just respect the hell out of you. And
thank you.
So yeah, I just, you've completely turned your life around, and I know we don't know each other well, but I am so proud of you. I'm so proud to call you a friend.
Thank you. I know. And the moral of the story is that you can turn a hooker into a housewife. There's that.
There is that.
There is hope for you hookers out there if you're listening.
Let's see if we can
tell
find
my
that.
homies.
Yeah, let's find that audience. Let's find who needs to hear this.
Hashtagging hookers.
Seriously, we will. Well, if anybody needs any amazing photos, Angel, tell people where they can find you.
Oh, Hike Pretty at Hike Pretty on Instagram, and it's Hike Pretty hyphen.
I'll put it.
I'm like, what is my Gmail? Yeah,
okay,
we're gonna work on. Pretty.
We're gonna work on getting you to memorize your email address.
Yeah.
But find Angel. Thank you so much for coming on and chatting. This has been super educational. I want to bring you back because I have so many more questions about so many more things.
Awesome.
But thank you for your time.
Of course. Thank you.
I, for one, have a lot of follow-up questions for Angel about a number of topics, but those hopefully will come on a follow-up episode. Angel, thank you so much for coming on and sharing your story with us. As I said, it is very far from my own personal story, so learning from your experience is so valuable, and thank you for sharing it. I found Angel's website. It is www.hikes-pretty.com. So hikepretty.com is where you can find Angel if you want some beautiful photos taken. I will have a link to it on my website, as well as some of the resources she mentioned, like Al-Anon. Please reach out if you know anyone that needs help. My website is www.rightinfrontofmyface.net. Please get in touch with me with comments, feedback, story ideas, all of it. I would love to hear from you. My email address is infrontofmyface@gmail.com. My Twitter is @infrontofmyface. My Instagram is @rightinfrontofmyface, and I would love to hear from any of you in any of those ways. The next couple weeks lead up to the holiday season, which, as mentioned, are not always the happiest time of year for all of us, myself included. So have a happy holiday and a great new year. Know that you are not alone if every moment is not perfection. And again, I would encourage you during this time to reach out to your neighbors, reach out to your friends, take 1 second to dig just a little deeper and find something about someone that you didn't know was right in front of your face.